This hearing will come to order. This hearing is fully virtual, and we must address a few housekeeping matters before we get started. For today's meeting, the chair or the staff designated by the chair, and that's Kyle, may mute participants' microphones when they're not under recognition for the purpose of eliminating background noise. Members, you are responsible for muting and unmuting yourselves. Remember, there's a little bit of a delay when you go to unmute yourself, and we will try working with the staff to let people know who's in order for asking the next question to help you out with that. If you do notice that you have not unmuted yourself, I might ask if you would like some help and you would like staff to unmute you. You can indicate by nodding your head, and staff will unmute your microphone. I remind all members and witnesses that we have a 5-minute clock, and if you're in the grid view, you can all see the 5-minute timer, and all members will have 5 minutes in which to address their questions. Now, if we have a technology issue, I will move to the next member until that issue is resolved, but we will remain and maintain the balance of your time, so you won't lose any time. If you notice a clock, as I mentioned, and you should have it in grid mode so you can all see it, you will know how much time is remaining. At 1 minute, the timer will turn yellow. At 30 seconds, it will be hearing a gentle tap with my improvised gavel here, and I will be reminding members that their time has almost expired. When your time has expired, the clock goes red, and I will begin to recognize the next member, as we know that we have a lot of questions, and I'd like to have everybody have a second round if possible. In terms of speaking order, we're going to follow the order that's set forth by House rules, and we'll begin with the chair and the ranking member and the full ranking member who's joining us here today, Ms. Granger. Members present at the time of the hearing is called to order will be recognized in their seniority. And finally, members not present at the time of the hearing is called to order. Finally, House rules require me to remind you that we have set up an email address to which members can send anything they wish to submit in writing to any of our hearings or markups or things that they'd like have entered into the record. That email address has been provided in advance to your staff. So let's begin. Good morning. And this subcommittee is going to be receiving testimony from the U.S. Southern Command. Our witness and South Commander is Admiral Craig Faller. Admiral Faller will welcome back to the subcommittee. We look forward to hearing your testimony. Today's hearing is the first in several subcommittee will hold with geographic combatant commanders to discuss national security challenges we face around the world, and to look to see how each command is postured and has the resources it needs to meet these challenges. The president, and it's called the skinny budget, right? It describes the need to counter the pacing threat from China as the department's top challenge. As we await the full budget, though, we are going to continue to move forward with these hearings. In the Southcom area of responsibility, influences of foreign actors and drug cartels has increased. Russia and China, with their meddling in Venezuela, has also created challenges. China's taken advantage of the COVID-19 pandemic to gain influence. So I want to hear from our witness about the destabilizing activities in the region and Southcom's response. At the same time, we need to be mindful that many of the challenges we face may require diplomatic or economic responses rather than a military one. We need to be smart about using all the tools that are at our disposal: development, defense, as well, and I think most importantly, diplomatic. One of the things that makes Southcom area of responsibility different from other combatant commands is the proximity to the United States. Events in the region can have a direct impact on the United States and our friends and allies. And there's numerous examples of this. Venezuela has completely broken down, and that country's economic and political system has displaced millions and created instability in the region. Thousands of Venezuelans have fled to the United States. Last month, the Biden administration recognized this humanitarian situation and extended temporary protected status to thousands residing here. The turmoil in Venezuela has created a haven for transnational criminal organizations who thrive in a lack of government and security. Criminal organizations continue to traffic record numbers of drugs into the United States, while also engaging in human smuggling and trafficking. In Central America, economic and security conditions, combined with extreme weather events made worse by climate change, continue to cause thousands to migrate north. And as we know, the region has been hit hard by COVID-19, straining healthcare systems and economies and creating instability, particularly in Brazil. We will be looking forward to hearing today how South Command has postured and resourced and is ready to play its part in addressing all these issues. We also look forward to hearing how Southcom is working with partner countries to address our common challenges. And finally, we will discuss the detention facility at Guantanamo, Cuba. We know that the Biden administration has launched a formal review of the detention facility with the aim of finally closing it before President Biden leaves office. And that is something I strongly, very strongly support. So with that, I want to thank everyone for participating in today's hearing. And I will now recognize the distinguished ranking member, Mr. Calvert, for his remarks.
Well, thank you, Chair McCollum. I appreciate that introduction. Admiral Faller, welcome back to what we understand will be your last appearance before the subcommittee. We deeply appreciate your service and that all the men and women who serve under your command. I appreciate the chair calling this hearing. As the Admiral knows, Southcom AOR is of keen interest to me and members of both sides of the aisle, especially since I'm from a border state and understand some of your challenges. Many of us have felt that your command has been undersourced relative to your needs, particularly my colleagues, Mario Diaz-Balart and Henry Cuellar, which is an issue that we sought to address in last year's bill. More broadly, the chaos on our southern border reminds us the perils of taking our eye off the ball and allowing our own hemisphere to become a victim of strategic neglect here in Washington. I hope your testimony will be a needed correction to that mindset. For example, I'm struck by your stark assessment that the hemisphere is under assault from criminal organizations, that imminent action is needed, and we are to effectively address China's corrosive but growing influence there. Much of this task will fall to others in the interagency, particularly the State Department and USAID, but Southcom has a critical role to play in countering threats to the homeland and helping to strengthen the security of our partners in the region. In your testimony, I hope you will identify Southcom's most serious resource constraints, including with respect to your long-standing requirement for persistent ISR. I look forward to testimony and dialogue to follow, and with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. Well, today we have the honor and the privilege of being joined by Ms. Granger, who's the full ranking member of the Appropriations Subcommittee. And Ms. Granger, I believe you were the first woman ever to lead this subcommittee on defense. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Admiral Faller, for being here. It's good to see you. Southcom is an extremely important area of operations that frequently doesn't get the priority it deserves because of conflicts in other areas of the world. It has been and will continue to be a priority of mine. The crisis on our southern border is just the most recent reminder of how critically important the region is to the security of our own country. I've seen for myself on many visits to the border and to the region that this is not a new problem we are trying to solve. We have tried many times to address the reasons why people decide to make the dangerous journey from Central America to the United States. Despite well-meaning efforts going back decades, we've not found the right formula for lasting success. And unfortunately, some of the changes made by the previous administration to stem the flow of migration have now been reversed. I hope this administration will consult with our partners in the region, as well as this committee, to understand the lessons that have been learned in the past to ensure that our efforts produce better results. I look forward to reviews on other pressing challenges, including China's growing influence in the region. I also hope you can speak to some of our successes in your area of responsibility, including expanding and deepening our key partnerships in the region, such as Costa Rica and Colombia. This hearing is typically classified so that we can gather the full picture of what's going on in the region. While this hearing today is open to the public, I hope it will not prevent you from giving us full answers. I encourage you to provide classified responses in writing if you can't respond to the questions members asked today. And I thank you again for your service, and I look forward to your testimony. And I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you, Ranking Member Granger. I was going to mention the fact that this is an open hearing. If something is classified, Admiral, please let us know, and we will arrange to have those answers done. Because we're living in the age of COVID, we needed to keep these Baton Command hearings moving forward as we await the full budget. There's no time to waste, and so a lot of what we can discuss can be done in open session. The staff, both Democratic and Republican staff, are working together to figure out how we can do classified briefings. I spoke with Chair Schiff yesterday. They had their first classified briefing in the Intel Committee, and it was a little bumpy as they all can't be in the room together. So we are working that out. And if somebody has something that's of a classified nature for an answer, sir, feel comfortable in saying so, and the staff will work to accommodate that those answers are not only provided to the member, but to everyone on the full committee. As we know, Chair Ryan has been working very hard on making sure that our capital area stays secure and safe. And Mr. Ryan, if you're available, I was going to have you take the first question. I know he's been trying to come in and out, so he's not. So with that, I'm going to ask a question on climate change before we turn to the ranking member. The reason why I'm going with climate change is it affects not only what we need to be doing to secure our assets and build resiliency into them, but also the response that you have in facing issues with responding to disasters and the instability that climate change causes. We know in Key West, for example, is particularly vulnerable to climate change, and you do have some plans moving forward down there. Guantanamo Bay is another area that's out there very vulnerable, as well as some of the response that you've now had to focus things on and missions on because of climate change. So could you talk about climate change as a national security issue, not only for the immediate effects of your command, but for the disruption it causes in the area?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member Calvert and distinguished members of the committee. And we'll get right into questions. On the interest of time, I had an opening statement that I'll just submit for the record. However you wanted to proceed, I'm ready to dive in. Whatever you want to do, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, you're muted. You're muted, ma'am.
Kyle, you have permission to mute me anytime you want. So I am so sorry, sir. We would like to hear your opening statement. We do have time. If you want to redact a little bit, that's fine. And that's on me. That's my apology to you, sir.
No, not at all. It's quite all right. But thank you all. Chair and Madam Chair and Ranking Member Calvert, distinguished members. It's a real opportunity to testify today. Now more than ever, I feel a deep sense of urgency that our region is under assault from a vicious circle of threats. And these are global threats, and they are right here, right now in our neighborhood. And the Western Hemisphere is our home. It's our shared neighborhood, and a number of you have talked about that proximity and how it matters. And in the interim national security strategy, we saw that it was designated as a hemisphere of vital national interest to the United States. The Indo-PACOM commander recently testified that China is the #1 strategic threat of the 21st century, and we see that in this hemisphere every day. I would like to address a few myths that I hear and do some myth busting at the start of this hemisphere. One myth that I often hear is that China's interests in the Western Hemisphere are primarily economic. The Chinese Communist Party, with its insidious, corrosive, and corrupt influence, seeks global dominance, and that runs from the Taiwan right here into our neighborhood. And our strategic approach for China as a nation and as a whole of nations together must be global as well. They have over 40 port deals in work. They're dishing out significant loans for political and economic leverage. They're pushing IT infrastructure, and they're engaged in an array of predatory practices such as illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing, all with little or no concern for human rights, the environment, or the rule of law. The second myth is that transnational criminal organizations are just drug traffickers and only a law enforcement problem. To be clear, it is our assessment that transnational criminal organizations, or TCOs, pose a direct threat to our national security. They traffic in arms, humans, drugs, and they claim tens of thousands of lives each and every year here in the United States and in our partner nations. They undermine democracy. Their murderous tactics have resulted in 43 of the 50 most violent cities being in our hemisphere, and they drive illegal immigration and allow bad actors like China to gain influence. Myth 3 is that the United States military or partner nation militaries have no role to play with these threats. Our role is a supporting role, for sure, but the professionalism of our United States military men and women is an example that our partners seek to model each and every day. And we do that through our education and training programs, our exercise programs, and our humanitarian assistance, to name just a few. We have established programs that help partner nations develop and implement respect for the rule of law and human rights. And our programs are, as is our equipment, are corruption-free. And when you work with the United States, you work on a relationship, not a client relationship. We provide not only positive role models, but the tools and strategies for them to implement, enhancing their capacity and making us all stronger together. Underpinning these national security threats is growing fragility in the region. COVID-19 has hit the hemisphere hard. According to the IMF, the economies of Latin America and the Caribbean shrank by 7.4% in 2020. The impacts of the pandemic will alter the hemisphere for years to come. And in the midst of the pandemic, 2 back-to-back major hurricanes devastated Central America, creating even greater instability. The pandemic and these unprecedented storms struck on top of the vicious circles of threats that I've highlighted, creating strong push factors for the people of the region to head north in search of safety and basic needs for their families. In Venezuela, despite an economy in tailspin and more than 5 million refugees that have fled the country, the illegitimate Maduro regime continues to cling to power with support from Cuba, Russia, Iran, and China. We can't face these daunting challenges on our own. The only way to counter these threats is to strengthen our partnerships. That's how we will win the strategic competition. No one nation is as strong as all of us working together. And I've been impressed by the nations who've worked shoulder to shoulder with us in countering threats to our neighborhood. For example, last year, Colombia brought together more than 24 nations in Operation Orion 6 to conduct a counter-transnational criminal organization operation. And earlier this year, Brazil became the first Latin American country to send forces to our high-end U.S. Army training in Fort Polk, Louisiana. Good neighbors are here to help when you need them most, especially during a crisis. And during this pandemic, United States Southern Command stepped up. We provide humanitarian assistance to our partners when the COVID struck, and we did it with speed of relevance, delivering field hospitals and critical PPE. To date, we've executed 498 projects in 28 countries with a total investment of more than $70 million. And this investment, thanks to your support, is making a difference. Southcom works every day to build the readiness and professionalism of our trusted military partners and security partners. Modest investments in intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, security cooperation, and presence go a long way in the hemisphere and will help us and our partners counter these global threats. Finally, our successes would not be possible with our most important resource, our people, our Southcom team. And we're taking proactive steps to protect our people from unacceptable behaviors like sexual assault and harassment, racism, and extremism. We take these threats seriously because it's key to readiness and it's the right thing to do. Madam Chair, Ranking Member Rogers, on behalf of the Southcom team, thank you for your trust. I look forward to the questions and discussion today.
Thank you so much. And your full testimony has been submitted for the record, and members have a copy of it. Thank you so much for that overview. So you heard my questions on climate change. You touched a little bit about some of the challenges that you're facing in your open statement. Would you please elaborate on that?
Our main line of effort, our main engagement is to work with our partners on their ability to respond rapidly. And the science is there. The climate is more violent. And I'll give you an example, Madam Chair. In the fall of 2019, I went on an extensive tour to different base locations in Guatemala. And as we flew around the country, talked about how they could improve their security and how we could partner together, it struck me that the rivers were dry, the fields parched, and the crops that should have been ready for harvest were withering. And they had been in a drought condition for some number of years. 1 year later, those same fields were flooded and washed out by the two most violent storms to hit that region in rapid succession. So Cat 4 hurricanes right around the beginning of November rolled in on the same track 15 days apart. And today, all three nations in Northern Triangle have declared national food emergencies. And there is a significant portion of their populations that don't have the basic food to eat. So that is an example. And then where we come to play is to help our partners determine the best way to respond. Their response, their partner militaries, is necessarily in support of their interagency. But just as we look inward in a disaster, they do. So we work on rapid response. We're very fortunate, as was mentioned in some of your opening statements, posture is key. We're very fortunate to have a security cooperation location in Sotocano, Honduras. And there we have Army helicopters lift, around 14 of them. We immediately deployed those helicopters during that hurricane to save lives and help our partners. We deployed them in support of our embassies, our ambassadors, and the USAID. And we had them in constant operation for about a month's time last November. And I think it points to when partners are in need and the United States steps forward and extends an outstretched hand, we build trust and we further strengthen that relationship for the long term, and it can be a force for good.
Thank you. Mr. Calvert.
Service. Admiral, my understanding that Southcom uses less than 1% of the DoD's ISR resources. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It's about 1% of the resources for ISR, and as I mentioned in my opening statement, that is absolutely critical. Our intel drives everything we do. We turn it into knowledge. We share it where we can, particularly with our own U.S. government or agencies. Helps us understand what's on the field and how to best respond long term.
So if you had additional ISR to counter transnational organized crime, other critical objectives, that would be very, very helpful. So you need additional platforms to make that mission succeed.
Yes, sir. And we really appreciate the support of this committee. In particular, in the past, we had an ISR transfer fund that was critical to meeting those needs, a very cost-effective fund that was not included in last year's budget. And while we have not seen the full budget for 22, I would anticipate that at the top of my unfunded requirements list will be the need for additional ISR. To include what we call non-traditional ISR, it is using machine learning and artificial intelligence to look through the vast amount of commercially available foreign data on foreign adversaries. We have used that ISR transfer fund money to do work in that environment, and we've uncovered a considerable amount of useful information that we've been able to pass to host nation for their action, our law enforcement partners, and in some cases, it's been able to used to be able to illuminate malign Chinese and Russian behavior.
Regarding the global posture review and the new national defense strategy, I guess they're reevaluating that at the Pentagon now, as you're aware, and our existing security relationships with key partners in the Southcom AOR. What focus do you think we need to change in regards to this, the great power competition, especially China? Many have questioned the utility, by the way, and I just bring that up because I only have limited time, of putting more littoral combat ships in your AOR to give you some more flexibility in that operation. What's your comment on that?
To start with the global posture review, it's welcome, always welcome to look at our global footprint. And I think our approach needs to be truly global. The front line of competition with China is in our neighborhood in this hemisphere. And in order for us to win that competition, which will be far more cost effective than a confrontation, we've got to compete with our strengths where we can get the best leverage. And in this hemisphere, a small amount of time and presence and resources has a high rate of return on investment. We need Navy ships to be in that mix. Up until 2019, we would get an occasional United States Navy ship. We made the case during the Combatant Command Review for additional assets, and we had on the average about 3 United States Navy ships over the past year to augment our very robust Coast Guard presence. Those Navy ships participated in transnational criminal organization operations, worked with partners, worked with the Coast Guard, and made a difference. Significantly put pressure on the transnational criminal organizations, sent a message to would-be competitors that the United States values the region and is here. We were able to conduct exercises with partners from Ecuador to Colombia to Peru, partners with capable navies. And so for me, it's about the capability. It's about having built in the U.S. Navy ships, working with Joint Interagency Task Force South and our Navy South component from Florida. And so whatever capability that the United States Navy can source to that, I welcome. But I would note that our littoral combat ships, particularly the Freedom's recent deployment and the Gabby Giffords, perform quite well. And I know that the Navy's committed to overcoming the challenges associated with the maintenance on those ships.
Thank you, Admiral. And Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Cuellar.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and Ranking Member, for holding this meeting. Admiral, I want to talk about your sense of urgency of what's happening in Latin America. As all of us in the committee have said, we are so used to looking at the Middle East and looking at other parts of the world, but we keep forgetting our own backyard. And I think the maps that you have provided to us to show where the criminal organizations are coming from and how they're affecting us, whether they're bringing in drugs or people, they're there. And many a times, as you said, and as we all know, sometimes those organizations are stronger than some of the state security forces that we have. And then on top of that, it's not only those trans-organizational groups that we have, but we have the influence of Iran in South America. Not only do we have the influence of them, but we also have the Russian influence in countries. But the one that we've been talking about is the one with the Chinese. The last time you provided this report, Admiral, we had X amount of countries in South America. 19, there were less than that, but now we have 19 out of the 33 countries that have joined the One Belt, One Road initiative. There are now 25 out of the 33 countries that have that host Chinese infrastructure projects, including Mexico, Belize, or even outside of that, the Bahamas, Panama, where the canal is at, and then so many other ones. Then we talk about even now 8 countries that are producing and using and testing or interested in purchasing Chinese COVID-19 vaccines. Then we look at, and this is what's very interesting, we know the major Chinese IT footprints and space tracking stations in Argentina. You have some in Peru, Ecuador, Panama, Brazil, and of course, Venezuela. And, you know, all that worries me because from the last time you provided this, the numbers keep going up, the investments keep going, and they keep getting closer and closer to the US-Mexico border where I live at. So I want you to talk to us about this sense of urgency and what this committee can fund. I know there's an assessment that you all are working on with the U.S. Department of State, USID, and I think the RAND Corporation is going to be involved to do that study, and should have been done by this last December, but COVID had something to do with that. But I think it should be ready by the 31st of this year. Tell us what we need to invest, because I agree with you. We should have a sense of urgency. I mean, we keep looking at everywhere, but it's our own backyard that worries me. Tell us about your sense of urgency and what we ought to be investing in and what this committee should be doing.
Well, thank you for emphasizing that sense of urgency that we certainly feel at United States Southern Command. And the department has been supportive, as has your committee. By last year, your committee in particular was supportive in establishing additional funds in our security cooperation. So I mentioned the 1% of ISR. Intelligence drives everything, and the more we know and understand what the threats are up to, the better we can participate in a whole of government and a whole of nation response. National Defense Strategy certainly nails it in talking about that global competition and the competition with China. So we looked at ISR, we talked about ISR. Security cooperation is key. That's what builds partner capacity. That's how we become more interoperable with partners. The U.S. has the best equipment in the world, and partners want our equipment, and it's a long-term relationship. We are, as the budget is unveiled, I believe that'll be at the top of my unfunded priorities. There's more that could be invested in the capacity. We sit at about $120 million for 28 countries to help them build. It's a good investment long-term for both the United States and our partners. It keeps them close. It's a relationship. And then on the presence, the posture matters. We were very supportive of Congress asking tough questions about some of the intended cuts to the defense attaché. Those are our front lines in our embassy. We should look at the manning of our embassies as very, very lightly manned for today's competition. And then look at where we're postured as a military and where is the United States postured. In this hemisphere, it's the right thing to not have permanent bases, have light locations where we can come in and out and work with our partners on their training and readiness. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers.
And am I on mute?
You're good.
Admiral, welcome to the subcommittee. Welcome to the Hill again. At one point in your career, I understand you were on the staff of Senator Ted Kennedy. So welcome back to the Hill. Let me ask you and follow up on Mr. Cuellar's line of questioning about the role of the Chinese in the drug trafficking in South America and Latin America. China adversely affects the region through drugs, human trafficking, guns, and illegal mining, all of which are underwritten through Chinese money laundering. And here's how I understand that works. Historically, drug cartels have struggled to get their illegal profits back within their borders. However, recently, Chinese, what we call money brokers, have emerged as vital partners for Latin American drug cartels. Those cartels will bring proceeds from U.S. illegal drug sales to these Chinese brokers who then laundry those proceeds back to the drug cartels here in Latin America. That's resulted in Chinese crime groups increasing their presence in places like Colombia. In fact, I spoke on the phone just yesterday with President Duque of Colombia, who, by the way, I think his administration is doing great work. I welcome your comments on eradicating coca, which is a main source of the opium in the U.S. So thank you, Admiral, for being here today. Let me ask you what you're doing about the drug problem, the drug cartels, and the Chinese brokers. Tell us how that works and what we're doing about it and what we need to do on the up and up.
Thank you for recognizing Colombia. They're a trusted partner. They exceeded all their goals in the counter-narcotics fight last year, despite the pandemic. I would trust them to be alongside me and our team in any fight as professionals that adhere to human rights and all the standards that we expect of our U.S. Armed Force men and women. And thank you. With respect to transnational criminal organizations, in this hemisphere, we have 8% of the global population and more than 60% of cryptocurrency. So it's clear that threat entities are working around ways to strangle their money supply. As I've met with key partners, key law enforcement partners like new NYPD, Counter-narcotics Strike Force, FBI, DEA, and others, consistently they cite the significant and consequential role of Chinese banks in money laundering. And it's very hard to crack into that with technology barriers, language barriers. And so when you look at the corrosive and corrupt influence of transnational criminal organizations, because corruption really fuels them, their ability to undermine officials and use extortion, it's the same sort of principles that the Communist Party of China thrives on. They could shut this down if they wanted to, but it's not in their interest to do so. It's in their interest to undermine the democracies so that they can gain more influence for their version of a future world order.
Well, it's a huge item. I'm told that transnational criminal organizations are generating around $90 billion in profits just from cocaine. And a lot of that cocaine and the drugs out of South America lands in my district. And we've been fighting that fight with an organization called Unite now for 12 years. But it's being flooded by the drugs coming out of South America. So thank you for your service, your lifetime of service, Admiral. And thank you for your present duties. Tough chore. Somebody's got to do it. You're doing great. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. We're going to hear from Mr. Aguilar, and then we will go to full ranking member Granger.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Admiral, good to see you again. Thank you for your service. We've talked a little bit about drug interdiction, and if I could just, ask a follow-up question on that. You talked with Mr. Calvert about some of the ISR capabilities, and through the briefings we've had, we know that our ability to identify drug smuggling in the Pacific is far greater than our capacity to interdict. What more can we do to help you in these efforts? What resources are needed? And if you can touch on specifically some of the work that you've been doing with the Coast Guard in aiding those drug interdictions in Southcom AOR.
Thank you. The area that we're looking at where the principal routes run is larger than the United States. And on any given day, we're We're covering that area with about 10 U.S. ships, mix of Coast Guard and U.S. Navy, an innovative vessel called the MMSV that you all have been appropriated, which has been very successful. And then we do that with partners. So when the Coast Guard and the United States Navy are there, partners step up. And we saw last year that partners increased their participation in the counter-transnational criminal organization operations, the pressure by 10% in interdictions. And that's significant in 1 year, especially given the pandemic. So it's an example of when the Coast Guard and the Navy are there, others will come out. We cited the success of Colombia. Costa Rica is another partner that has done extremely well. Panama just stood up a fusion center. The key here long-term is getting a network of partners together to keep pressure on the source, the supply lines, all aspects of the business model. Another key in the last year, as part of our surge in this threat space, has been the development of a targeting process with the interagency here in the U.S. So learning from what we've done in the counter-terror ops and then working as a part of a U.S. government interagency process, we've been able to improve that targeting process by using machine learning, artificial intelligence, and really increase the speed of which we can build a target package and then hand off to a partner nation or law enforcement. So that's significant. We'll never interdict our way out of this. We've got to look at these organizations as an organization and determine where their key nodes are, centers of gravity, if you will, and then crush that. We talked about money laundering as part of that. There's a cyber piece of this. There's an information piece of this. So bringing all elements of power in all domains is the way forward for us to make a lasting difference on this threat.
I appreciate the answer. Thanks so much, Admiral. Can you talk a little bit more about China and what keeps you up at night as far as their activities within the AOR and the relationships in some of these countries?
It's when we sit down with our partners, it's part of the conversation. We talk about the Chinese economy and the U.S. economy. So it's undeniable that China is the #1 trading partner with the United States, #1 trading partner with most of our partner nations. Now they're the #1 trading partner with South America writ large, and soon I think will be a larger trading partner with the hemisphere. So we have to determine as a nation how we win the competition without ever going to conflict. And it's when China's able to come in and gift militaries in our region significant quantities of money with very little or no strings attached, that concerns me. Some of our key partners have turned those gifts down, and I applaud that and thank them for turning it down. Others say to me, we feel like we're drowning, Admiral, in a lifeboat, and we're going to take that life ring because we need it. And I say, hey, watch where the cord is attached and what happens on that cord. We recently hosted a security conference with our allies, UK, Canada, French, the Dutch, that have interests here. And one of the Canadian members to that conference from their foreign ministry, a citizen, a civilian, said to me, we see the region, the threats of the region, as a whirlpool and the nations in a lifeboat that are getting sucked down by the various pressures. So it does add to that sense of urgency that's been a theme here. And that's what really keeps me up at night.
Thanks, Admiral. Appreciate your service and thanks so much for being here today with us. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yield back.
Thank you. And with no disrespect mentioned, trying to do things from distance to distance here, we will now hear from Ms. Granger. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Admiral, am I coming across? Admiral, can you hear me? Okay, good. President Biden indicated during the campaign that he intended to devote as much as $4 billion to address the root causes of Central American migration. And the budget framework released last week includes the first year of this funding, $850 million to address the matter. We've talked so much about the issues in your area and the drug trade, and particularly the drug trade and the help we need when they're going by water. Recently, I was in a meeting and was very, very concerned and disappointed to hear that there was an attempt to mothball all the littoral combat ships. And so I would ask you, you mentioned that those ships, have you found them helpful, particularly in the area you're in and in the drug control?
The Navy's presence has been essential, and it has increased the capacity of our partners. And frankly, I've been on board the ships, destroyers and littoral combat ships, and talked to the Navy crews. They've really improved their readiness, so it's a win-win. On the program that you mentioned for the Northern Triangle, it's a welcome program. We need a long view for the region. And Plan Colombia was a good model because we stuck with it for 10 years and we didn't have fits and starts annually with the plan. This is a generational problem, developing the sustainable economies and the type of democracies that can take care of themselves so that we don't have this crisis in Central America that drives people to walk thousands of miles to save their kids and save their lives. And I think, ma'am, that the military does have a role here, a very focused supporting role, because our track record, and we've learned from our past, we know how to abide by the rule of law and human rights, and we have a human rights program at Southcom, and we've worked with our partner nations to professionalize them, and they're part of the solution. And in order to help going forward, we've got to be present to help influence good behavior to be part of the long-term sustainable solution. So we welcome a long-term plan. And so far, the discussions and the involvement of my command with Chairman Milley and the Secretary of Defense have been very transparent, very iterative, and they've been listening to us.
Good. I hope you'll speak out for the littoral combat ships, because part of that was going into shallow water, being quiet, almost silent, the speed. And so all the other indications I have, they're still helpful. So I was surprised at that. I want to make sure that you have, are there other resources that in this pandemic time, are there other resources you need to change or add to help you?
Our humanitarian assistance program and the authorities we have there are the best tool I have. It's responsive, it's scalable. We can meet partners' needs short and long term. With the support of Congress, we received additional money, and the Department of Defense additional money at the beginning of the pandemic. We've applied that to good use. It's an authority that we're able to apply to partners' health agencies or civil agencies. I would like to see an expansion of that authority to be able, and the appropriation of the money to be able to work with partner militaries. And I think we could get enough oversight on it that we would ensure it did the right thing. That would be in humanitarian assistance realm. Similarly, given the competition we're in and the need and our need to be able to flex to a partner's needs, when I visited the region in October, I found our partners were just exhausted and running out of fuel and basic necessities. Yet I lack a near-term relevant mechanism to provide some assistance in that manner. We have 2-year funding, which is greatly appreciated, a long view, which is what we need. But I think we need a military assistance program for small dollar amounts. I'm talking 15, 50,000, that would be real game changers to build near-term trust and respond to partners' needs mill to mill.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I yield.
Thank you. Ms. Kirkpatrick, and then Mr. Womack.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for having this hearing. Admiral, I represent a border district in Arizona and am very focused on how we ensure our border communities are protected from illicit drug activity and violence from transnational criminal organizations. while the Department of Defense does not have the lead in many aspects of the counter-drug efforts, the department is the lead agency for the detection and monitoring of aerial and maritime transit of illegal drugs into the United States. So my question is this: can you provide an update on efforts to counter transnational criminal organizations, and how does the U.S. measure success or failure in this area?
We appreciate the work that Air Forces South in Tucson has done in the aerial port of this detection and monitoring. And they work hand in hand with Joint Interagency Task Force South in Key West, which is a team of teams that is led by a Coast Guard two-star Rear Admiral Doug Fears, each and every day focused on this very problem set. In GIATF, we have every relevant agency in the U.S. that works in the counter-narcotics, counter-transnational criminal organization space, as well as partner nations from 24 different partner nations. And that is the real key. And we've made progress. So using the additional resources that the department supplied in terms of Navy ships last year, we put more pressure on the networks. That kept our partners in the game. These security cooperation programs do have long-term payback for the United States. And as I mentioned previously, our partners stepped up and increased their participation and their interdiction. We were able to increase our targeting. So we were able to get on more targets last year, disrupt more flow, put more pressure on the networks, which generates more opportunity for partner nations and law enforcement partners to capture, detain. And so we're on a good glide slope, but clearly not enough when we still have tens of thousands dying in the United States, and we still have organizations that have budgets larger and bigger than the many of the security forces they face, and organizations that control territory, frankly. And so more pressure, sustained pressure, and more focus on the source, and more focus on, as was mentioned in some of your opening comments, diplomacy and development as a way for people to have other models.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have one other question here. You also have the only human rights office throughout the combatant commands. Do you see meaningful progress in these areas, and what support do you need from Congress to strengthen these programs?
We could have the best equipment, and we do in the United States. We can have the best women and men in our force, and we do. But we could still lose the competition that we're in or the next war that we fight because we don't have legitimacy with our people. We can never take that for granted. And I joined the military 42 years ago. It was not a foregone conclusion that we would have the trust of the United States population. And we do this by adhering to the rule of law, human rights, respect, those unacceptable behaviors that I talked about at the beginning, relentless pursuit of all of that. Our command recognized over 20 years ago that key to sustainable security in this hemisphere was improving the human rights record of all aspects of our engagement mill to mill. And we invested in a human rights team. And we've increased that investment. It's something we fund out of HIDE. It's not a program of record with the Department of Defense. We've been able to install human rights advisors in our partner nation security force, conduct workshops with our partner nations, ensure that it's embedded in their training programs, that it's embedded in their doctrine. And we've offered that into all the U.S. schoolhouses as a key element of building that professionalism and legitimacy.
Thank you for good work that you're doing. I, as representative of border district in Arizona, really appreciate your efforts. And Madam Chair, I yield back.
Mr. Womack.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and Admiral Faller. It's great to see you again. You know, of all the COCOMs that we're going to get posture briefings from, I consider this to be, as it concerns the direct impact on my constituents, to be of one of the most important, if not the most important. To be clear, what's going on in Indo-PACOM or in Eastern Europe and some of the other trouble spots around the globe are pose existential threats to our country. There's no question about that. But as it concerns my constituents, there is not another combatant command, AOR, that has such an immediate impact on my people than yours. And so we're going to beat this TCO issue again because I think it's of critical importance. And I just recently came back from the border, went down with Whip Scalise to McAllen, Texas. I know that's a little north of your AOR. But I'm reading from a slide right now that was given to us by the Rio Grande Valley Border Patrol folks. In the period of time between March 4th and April 1st, there were 14 plus pounds of cocaine. So this is less than a month. 14 pounds of cocaine, 3,251 pounds of marijuana, $1 million in currency, 24 firearms, 8 gang member arrests, 622 criminal arrests. That's in less than a month. And I know that a lot of this stuff is coming up into my district. So thank you for your leadership in trying to bang the drum on the transnational criminal organizational piece. But there's one part about it that we've only kind of glossed over, and that is the tremendous migration that is happening in a lot of your AOR into our area. That is having and I know you've got some numbers on it. How many people have actually migrated out of those areas because of the safety concerns? Can you speak to that and how incredibly important these numbers are?
This threat's hitting your home of Bentonville, Arkansas, and my home of Freiburg, Pennsylvania. It's killing people, and it's stressing economies and governments, and it's undermining security. Just as an example, Congressman, when you look at this, yesterday the intelligence agencies published an annual report, it's unclassified, and they looked at the scope of the migration over a 5-year period. 40 million have migrated in this hemisphere, and they're looking at Haiti, Cuba, Venezuela, and Central America. 40 million people. And that is the insecurity, the lack of ability to get health care for your children, the lack of ability to find something to eat. And it's got to be a whole government, whole nation, regional kind of approach, sustained to put these numbers and give folks some hope.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your willingness to bring this to the attention of not only the Congress, but other military leaders. And even though you're going to be retiring sometime this fall, I sure hope that you'll continue to be outspoken on it. By the way, speaking of partnerships, as everybody on this committee knows, I'm a big advocate of the state partnership program. And I'd be remiss if I didn't give you an opportunity to talk about how incredibly important the SPP program is in your AOR.
The state partnership program is the number one assigned force that we have in order to help our partners build capacity in the United States Southern Command. We're blessed to have the most robust partnership lineup with 24 partners. Arkansas is aligned with Guatemala. It's a long-term relation as our Guard gets to develop and build that. And we really appreciate Congress's support in that. And I'm constantly in communication with the tags of the various states as we look to how to help partners build capacity. And frankly, training's good for the Guard too. I get the feedback. It's a two-way win as we move forward. I think as we look forward, it'd be if the Guard had some flexibility on this for 2-year money, things that could meet the partner's speed. They often have difficulty budgeting inside of our cycle and being able to do things. That might be one thing to look at. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Madam Chairwoman, before I yield back, I just want to associate myself with the remarks of Ken Calvert and others that have talked about the ISR needs of Southcom and the ISR transfer fund that was lost, but critically important. leveraging that kind of technology with the mission going on in Southcom, I think is pretty important. And I sure hope that we can continue to make the arguments for it. Now I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to hear from Ms. Capter and then Mr. Diaz-Balart, and I'm waiting to see if Mr. Ryan and Mr. Kilmer are going to be able to join us or in other meetings. Thank you, Ms. Capter.
Admiral Faller, thank you for your service to our country. This has been a rather grim hearing in the way I view the world. I'm reminded 60 years ago, John Kennedy launched the Alliance for Progress. And I'm glad he did, but it doesn't seem like we've made a lot of progress over the decades. So maybe the architecture of what we're doing isn't integrated in a proper way. What percentage of the territory in your AOR would you say is ungovernable?
Thanks for mentioning the success of past historical models. We've spent a lot of time looking at what's worked and what hasn't worked, and the key is often the consistency over time and then getting at all aspects of our partners' needs, not just a couple points here or there. And the places where we've been able to make that work, we've turned chaos into democracy. So while there is a sense of urgency and some amount of grimness, as you suggest, Congresswoman, in the 90s and the 80s, many of our partners in Central America were in civil wars. And so from that respect, their democracies are fragile and young. And we have to hang with them as we get this right. And I think there's hope. I've met the people. We have values in common to get this right. In terms of the threat, and as we discussed, the transnational criminal organizations that are in many cases more better funded, their end strength is larger than the police. In some cases, the police and the militaries combined in some countries, some 200 different organizations, and they do control territory. It ebbs and flows. And
take a stab, Admiral. What percent? What percent is not under normal civil?
I'd have to take that one for the record and come back with a more detailed analysis.
Is it more than a third? Is it more than a third?
I don't think it's more than a third, ma'am. But there is swaths that are very concerning, and we'd have to look at this holistically with my shipmate from Northcom to look at the impacts from Mexico. The Mexican cartels have grown their market share and moved south, which is a concerning trend.
Well, I was extremely troubled when Mexico's president released Caro Quintero, the #1 drug lord on the DEA's list. I thought, so Mexico's gone. And I won't go into all my experiences with Mexico. My experiences with people are very good. My experiences with the government is horrendous. And so I think my sense is that we are talking about narco states. And I'm interested in your assessment, if not publicly now, privately, as to what is happening in these different countries and which of them are absolutely ungovernable. And that is at the basis of so much of what is causing disturbance in this country, certainly with the narcotics trade. And I would recommend a book, you've probably read it, by Sam Quinones, Dreamland. Because after the collapse of the white corn market in Mexico, the displaced by corn grown in my region, yellow corn, the drug trade began to lock down the opium fields in the very places where the white corn market disappeared. We've never solved that problem. We've never, and all those people from those villages from Oaxaca and everything started to move north. They left their parents in those provinces, and then the kids came up north. A lot of them got involved in the drug trade. And I sense it's out of control. You may not feel that way. You're closer to the ground than I am, but I know my region up in northern Ohio, because of drugs and the routes that are coming from Mexico to Columbus, Ohio, and then like a spoke out around the entire, is frightening. And my own neighbors involved in some of that drug trade. So it's a continental scourge. And it doesn't seem to me that the way we're structured, we're being maximally effective. So, and you've given a great share of your life to this. So I'm very interested in the map of what is ungovernable. I'm a city planner by training. I like to look at maps. And I like to understand. I also know that after World War II, Britain created new towns, safe places. I think we need a different strategy that's more cosmic, less, because the current system isn't working, it's getting worse, and China's an added complexity. But if you really look at what's going on there, I don't think that our approach addresses the magnitude of what we're facing. My time has probably expired, but I am very interested in another setting to look at the map that you might have. You're a Navy man, but I think you like land, and very interested in what is ungovernable and other alternatives to create safe havens for people. How do we do that? And I mean villages. And what do we do about those places that are raising the plants that produce the cocaine? From an agricultural standpoint, I've never heard one person from the State Department or any department talk about that massive transformation that occurred after 1993. That completely turned Mexico upside down. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We now have Mr. Diaz-Balart, then Mr. Rupersberger, and then Mr. Carter.
Madam Chairwoman, excuse me, thank you very much. Admiral Faller, first and foremost, words don't suffice to thank you for your decades of honorable service to our country. I have the privilege to have Southern Command in my district, and I would tell you we've had over the years, over the decades, some outstanding leaders of Southcom. But Admiral, no one has done a better job than you have. So again, thank you so very much. In your testimony, you mentioned how many Americans die from illicit drugs. I think it's 87,000 in 2020 alone. And that's a result of the drug trade that originates in Latin America. And so very specifically, what kind, and I know that, Southcom interdicts more drugs that I believe all of the police departments in the entire country combined. But what specifically, what resources do you need to be able to do even more? Because you literally are saving American lives.
And we do interdict, in accordance with the stats you provided, the bulk of the drugs for about 1% of the overall budget that's associated with that effort across all the U.S. agencies. And it's an indicative of being able to try to push it to the source before it gets divided into so many little packets that can ease into South Florida or Ohio or all the other places. And the key, I think, to go back to the last question, the key is that there are good people and our ability to leverage our values, which is our strength as Americans, and values that are common to some of these good people, and create stronger institutions in our partner nations that are resilient to corruption. And that has to be a whole government effort. So we have to focus on a corruption-free, strong military and police and judicial systems. And when we leave off the pressure or don't incentivize our partners to do better in a certain area, it creates a gap or a hole. I hear from partner nations that, hey, look, we wish we had a stronger judicial system, because when the criminals get to the end in the judicial system, to quote a phrase from Costa Rica, they say pura vida, which is don't worry, be happy. They fear U.S. judicial system. They respect the U.S. military. They respect our Customs and Border Protection. They respect our State Department INL. So staying consistent and investing in the institutions. A couple programs that are important that are under-resourced. Institutional capacity building. It's a program, and I have enough for about 3 advisors for the whole hemisphere. It's funded through 333 security cooperation money out of an institute in California, Monterey, California, where the ministries of our partners will agree to put an advisor in there. And these are experienced, savvy, usually retired military personnel to help them develop transparent, accountable, corruption-free budget systems. That's a small investment for a good rate of return if we fund it and if we stay with it. There are more examples like that where we can get results. I'll give you one more. A partner nation, Guatemala, their special naval forces, working with other U.S. government agencies, we've developed a very capable, corruption-free, trustworthy special naval force that gets it done on the sea. There are areas of that that we can spread the trust and spread the accountability, but we got to stay with it over time. And that small, focused investment does have a rate of return for a safer U.S. in every one of our cities.
Admiral, you talked about, and this is not a classified briefing, so I don't expect. As a matter of fact, let me just ask a couple of specific questions about state actors and non-state actors. As far as, are they a threat to our national security interests in this hemisphere, or are they not? So let me just very briefly. China, is it a threat to our national security interests in the region?
As I stated in the opening, China is the pacing threat for the 21st century. And so
How about Russia?
Absolutely. And I would be remiss on the transnational criminal organizations. One of the gaps, Congressman, is that it's not reflected in our higher level documents. So I that's a decision that will be made by policymakers, and we'll respect that. But it's hard to compete if we don't respect something as a threat to our national security.
How about Cuba?
Cuba's malign influence is felt throughout the hemisphere. I wish it were different, but they undermine democracies. They're currently their de facto Praetorian Guard to keep the illegitimate Maduro in power.
And lastly, and I'm running out of time, Iran, are they also a player in this hemisphere?
The long arm of Iranian malfeasance is felt around the globe. They're the #1 state sponsor of terrorism in the world.
Thank you, Admiral. Again, Madam Chairwoman, thank you. My time has run out, so I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Ruppersberger, Mr. Carter, and Mr. Ryan will be after Mr. Carter.
Well, thank you, Councilwoman McCollum, and also Ranking Member Calvert. Admiral, you have served your country well. I've always felt, the amount of years I've been in Congress, and I was on the Intelligence Committee for 12 years, that we, from a resource point of view, have not given the resources to South America, Central America. And I think we're paying for it in a lot of different ways. And I will say that from your perspective and your leadership, you have been able to bring the team together. You mentioned in your statement that Intel drives everything we do, and that gives you the ability to do the things you need to do. And part of what I like from your style is the teamwork. And I'm going to call out the DEA as an example, a very small organization, and they're in a very dangerous situation, but they've done a good job now with the support of the military, FBI. I think we're on the right road. So thank you for what you've done. China's influence in Latin America continues outside of Mexico to be really the region and the involvement in South America, Central America. And I'm very concerned about where we are with respect to China. And I want to give you some numbers here. That China's trade with the region overtook the United States in 2018 and extended that in 2019 to more than 22 billion versus U.S. trade of 198 billion, according to analysis of the trade figures from the UN Comtrade database. Now, I know that throughout the pandemic of the United States, there has been we have had a great partner with the different countries that we're working with, but in the end, we're looking that a situation is getting worse and worse as it relates to China. Now, from your perspective, what do you need to do to counter China in the region? Do you see any changes in the diplomatic front with the new administration? And also, to what degree do you see insecure technology offerings from China, like Huawei, or bad loan terms driving relationships between your AOR, area of responsibility, and China? And do countries truly want to work with the Chinese, or do they want them as a piggy bank? Now, outside of our near peer, what type of Iranian activity are you also seeing in the region? I think you answered that question before, and I've always been concerned about their potential to stir up conflicts in our backyard.
The focus of our national defense strategy on strengthening partnerships and of our Southcom strategy of strengthening partnerships is exactly the best approach to outcompeting China. So focus first and foremost by looking in the mirror every day and asking ourselves, are we the best, to use a sports analogy, athletes on the field, morally, physically, mentally? and ready to take that forward, engage with our partners. And I can say we are. We're not the perfect people, but we work hard at all aspects of that to get it right in the United States military and in Southcom in particular. And so partners want to partner with the world champions, and that's our standard to never lose. We appreciate your support in that. And so when I sit with partners, they want to work with the U.S. Absolutely. And we have so much in common. Values in this hemisphere being at the top of that list, the great U.S.-built equipment. And so we look for areas of commonality and how we move that forward. We've got to be present to do that physically and with some level of resources. As I say, you got to be on the field to compete, and you got to be seen and heard to compete. And I don't ask partners to choose, because that puts them often and publicly in a very cumbersome and tough situation. But I do point out, what system do you want, and do you have, and do you want your children and grandchildren to grow up under, a democracy or an autocracy? And it's really an easy question to answer as we move forward. So our best way to compete is to be the best, and folks want to partner with us, but we got to be consistent. We got to stay with them in that respect. China, they're growing in their boldness. You mentioned a number of things, Congressman. We see it with the vaccines. So the U.S. is the largest contributor to COVID health response in this hemisphere, but you wouldn't know that by some of what you hear coming out of Chinese and Russian information and disinformation. We just got to stay the course and make sure the truth is told.
Okay, you're back. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carter and then Mr. Ryan. Mr. Carter.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm trying to operate this thing and I don't do very well.
You're doing great. I've had a couple slip ups today. You're doing great.
Thank you for being patient with me. I've got another hearing I'm trying to take care of too. Admiral, I had a great conversation with you yesterday. Sorry to have to cut it off to go vote, but we had a great talk and I enjoyed it. The transnational criminal organizations has been the subject we've been talking about a lot. It's reported that over 200 violent TCOs control territory in Central and South America, and they influence government and the governance of those countries. Additionally, China and Russia are involved in the region and putting their influence out. As these TCOs traffic guns, drugs, money, and people into the United States, basically through Mexico, illegal aliens are being housed on military bases such as Fort Bliss, Texas, and Joint Base San Antonio. Do you see any inherent risk to national security in housing those people on active military posts?
Congressman, I'll leave the policy of where we put them to the Department of Defense and others that are looking at that. The underlying driver, though, here, the violence, the murderous violence, the ability of these groups to use corruption to undermine governance and capture territory is critically at the center of gravity, the center of this perfect storm. And that's what we're really trying to get after, working with all the U.S. government agencies. And as we stated, the absolute criticality of intel to drive that as a way to better understand what levers need to be applied and pulled.
Well, the way I look at it, and I've looked at it, I was concerned about national security issues, but in turn, I'm also very concerned about placing children on live fire military posts like Fort Hood, where live fire ranges within walking distance of where they would be housed, and most of these children are teenagers, and teenagers are very curious, and when tanks start shooting, they're going to go to want to go see. And I'm worried about somebody getting killed. But I know that's outside your purview. What you're doing on the border, though, has an influence on what is pushing this massive migration basically into my state. Now we're moving them to other states as they require, but it is a gigantic problem for the state of Texas. The one road, one belt program that the Chinese are doing, we are doing some things to counter those things. Are the things we are doing to counter them as effective, or at least somewhat effective, in changing the influence that they're imposing on our Central and South American friends?
The security and all the insecurity that you cite, Congressman, has got to be part of the economic solution. And so when One Belt, One Road and its promise of Chinese investment and Chinese access to Chinese economies, the best way to outcompete that is to use U.S. companies, incentivize their business and incentivize supply chains for the Americas, secure supply chains that take advantage of that proximity to our country and take advantage of the tremendous hardworking labor that comes with the migration, and so that has to be, and I think it was mentioned a number of times today, getting development right with the diplomacy and the security has got to be key, and we're focused on that. We routinely meet, and we have in our headquarters members of the interagency groups, and we look for ways to help enable them as a small piece of the security solution to get the work done. Developmental Finance Corps, which was part of Congress's BUILD Act, is one such lever that shows promise, I think. And I know that our ambassadors, as I interact with them in the region, are focused on these types of things.
You mentioned in our conversation yesterday an idea of maybe a Central South American country Marshall Plan. And with all the money we're throwing around these days, we'd have to figure out how to fund all that. But would you like to talk about that concept?
Mr. Carter, we are going to have time for a second round, so that'll give the Admiral a time to think that over.
Okay.
So I'm interested in hearing the answer. Mr. Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Admiral. One of the questions I had, I read with great interest about what happened in March with the United States Coast Guard cutter Stone, which was deployed to the South Atlantic to help curb illegal Chinese fishing. And this was the Coast Guard's first such deployment in over a decade. And the mission, we're told, was primarily a success. And the crew was able to conduct some training with several countries. And evidently the mission hit a snag when the Argentine government refused to provide dock services for the Stone. And we know that would normally be pretty routine. And we know that Argentina, has been one of the largest recipients of funds from the Chinese government for their Belt and Road Initiative. And so I'm just interested in your opinion if you believe that deepening relationship with China was the reason that we were refused to be able to dock the Stone there.
Coast Guard cutter Stone, national security cutter, and those are awesome ships, well built. I've been aboard them. They're built to do a range of missions. Had a very successful patrol, as you point out, Congressman, and was aimed at getting after a significant source of insecurity, which is this idea of illegal, unregulated, unreported fishing. Admiral Schultz and our Homeland Security Department have put forward a strategy for that. We are participating with them. They are in the lead, and this patrol was part of that. Last year, we saw off Ecuador tremendously large fleet, primarily of state-owned Chinese distant water fleet that would every day turn off their transponders and go into the ecological zone of the Galapagos. And we can only wonder what was happening when you turn those off. It's for two reasons. Only you're trying to mask illegal behavior, or it's broken and you don't have half a fleet broken at the same time. So this was meant to get after that. Argentina's had their share of issues with illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing. And we worked with their Coast Guard successfully. I was in Argentina last week. Had a very excellent series of meetings with the Minister of Defense, their Chief of Defense, about a whole range of areas we can cooperate on together. They want to partner with us. We talked about the Coast Guard shipstones work and exercise. It's a right level. And we got into the issue with the port. It was approved. And then we had to try to find another port at the last minute because of some port safety concerns that were raised by our Coast Guard. So I actually, after speaking with Argentinian authorities, I actually think it was more of a misunderstanding than any slight. They clearly want to partner with us. They point out that China is their largest economic partner, as it is with the U.S. So we've got to figure out how to do that going forward, and provide an incentive for U.S. business industry and our defense establishment to be able to sell in a competitive manner with Argentina.
So it was a safety issue that we determined it was a safety issue.
We canceled the first port visit based on concerns raised by the cutter skipper. So I'm confident. I trust in what I heard from the Minister of Defense, the Chief of Defense there, that was a right decision. And I look forward to the next time we can come down and do a port visit in Argentina.
Safety as far as just safety of the ship, or terrorism, or some kind of attack, or?
No, there's a number of factors. A ship driver myself, you assess the water depth, the pier, the weather, all kinds of things, and it was a decision made at the commanding officer level. I've done the same thing before a port visit, as you assess what's best for your ship. Certainly not terrorism or any physical threat safety to that ship. Argentina has very capable security forces, and that would have been taken care of, I'm assured.
What are the international laws governing the illegal fishing? Is there a body of law, regime that we're relying on to try to stop it?
Absolutely. And within nations' exclusive economic zones, they have a right to that by international law. And we see that there are nations that have distant high seas fleets that routinely violate that international protocol.
Got it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. We have an opportunity to do another round of questions. I'm going to ask, as you can see, the timer's been set to 3 minutes. And we will start with Mr. Cuellar, who is not on camera. So
I am here.
There you are. I didn't think you'd miss a chance, Mr. Cuellar. There you go. 3 minutes.
Especially. Thank you. Admiral, just give me an inventory of what we can do to address the issues that I asked on the first round of questions. Just quickly give me an inventory of items that you think we ought to fund or put language in there. Just a quick inventory.
Thank you. First, I haven't seen the details of the next year's budget. Once we do, we'll come forward, as you all have asked, and as we've done in the past, with an unfunded requirements list. I'm confident that our department has a prioritization system that's fair. We'll make our case, but intel is one area, and particular support for ISR platforms and the ISR transfer fund. In security cooperation, we greatly appreciate the committee's support last year to restore which had been about a 32% cut over the previous 3 years. And at about 120 million level, I think we need to all ask in the Department of Defense, with that being my main muscle mover, where the money is best spent to win the competition. And I think we could, we'll make the case in our unfunded requirements based on what we see in the level for additional funds there. And then in terms of security cooperation locations and presence, continued support to ensure that we have the right level of people and the right level of presence. That would include access to locations like Comalapa and Sotocano.
Okay, good. Well, and again, thank you for what you do. I'm going to yield back the balance of the time, but if you can follow up with the committee on my question, we want to be very helpful. I think the committee shares, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think we share the sense of urgency of what we're seeing with those actors in South and Central America.
If I could just add, sir, on the report that you asked for is very important because it will provide from a respected think tank an analysis of the needs that we can compare to our own analysis, and I think would really inform the work of your committee and Congress to help look at the global balance of resources that we have, recognizing we'll never have enough for all the needs we have, but where is it best applied to get the leverage we need to be competitive today and tomorrow. And so I welcome that. I also appreciated your initiative on the Western Hemisphere initiative. It really is the seeds for what would be a Marshall Plan-like initiative as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair and Ranking Member, members of the committee. Yeah, I was hoping this would have been ready on December 31st of 2020, but COVID hit. So it'll be ready on July 31st, and this will give us a comprehensive of what we need to do with the Department of Defense, State Department, USAID, a whole of the government approach for Central America. So maybe we can put a placeholder there and work on it. But my time's up. Thank you so much, Admiral, and thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I look forward to seeing the report. And this needs to be a whole of a government approach. We need to be relying on diplomacy and development, and defense should always be our last resort. Would Mr. Calvert, and Mr. Calvert, could you find out if Ms. Granger is going to be able to join us back and let our staff know? I know your staff's listening, so they could just email. Mr. Calvert.
No problem. We'll do that immediately. Thank you, Chair. You brought up Guantanamo, Chair. I wanted to get in that with you a little bit, Admiral. I understand. I know you recently closed Camp 7. The Chair and I were out there about, I guess, how long has that been? About a year ago, I guess. And you consolidated everything into the Camp 5, and we took a look at that when we were down there. Could you describe the reason for this change? I think I know that was obviously financial, along with daily operations related to costs. Is that working?
I certainly appreciated visiting there with you and the Chair. It was very productive and actually helps us to see it through your eyes. It was principally a safety issue. That the camp you references was never built to last, and it was in need of a number of safety upgrades. And my mission is the safe treatment of the detainees, and that's what we take very seriously. There will be manpower efficiencies associated with that, so it's a good in that respect as well. But that's why we did it moving forward. I would note too, and you saw this when you were there, sir, is the importance of that naval station as the only base we have in the hemisphere. Earlier, I mentioned some security cooperation locations, but that is the base. It reports directly to the Department of the Navy. It's a strategic location, and the detention facility that is under my command is just a small tenet of that overall strategic location in the naval station.
I understand that, Admiral. But one thing I wanted to bring up, as you know, the people that are left there are the worst of the worst, and that's why they're there. It's what, you have approximately 40 people there, including Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind behind the 9/11 attack of the United States. Is that about the right number, about 40 of them?
Yes, Congressman.
Now, the president has indicated a desire, as the chair mentioned, to close the detention facility at some point. Have you received any tasking orders or otherwise have any information that a policy decision has been made to close that facility?
That'll be a policy decision, and we'll flex to however it goes forward. And we're looking forward to being part of that process, but no decision's been made to my knowledge.
Finally, obviously, you have the most, in my mind and a lot of people's mind, one of the most evil men on the planet. at Guantanamo, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. We were supposed to set up trials for some of these folks, which never took place. You want to comment on what's going on with the legal process there on Guantanamo?
The commission process is important. It's important as a nation of laws that we get this right and see this to fruition. My role in this is to ensure that the commissions get the right support logistically and with security. The commissions themselves report directly to the Office of the Secretary of Defense. And I know everybody in the Department of Defense is committed to moving forward on this line. COVID, of course, set us back some as we've worked through the protocols associated with ensuring that we don't introduce any COVID-19 at all on the island.
Well, you can understand it's been over 20 years, or almost 20 years, since 9/11, and a lot of Americans are frustrated that the final justice has not been submitted to that individual. So I appreciate your concern. Thank you. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Aguilar. I know you've been there on and off. We will come back if you join us again. Ms. Capter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Admiral, how difficult would it be for me to get a briefing listing every one of the countries that you have responsibility for under your command and to get them ranked? So, for example, you've mentioned Guatemala and the significant challenges of Guatemala. They would be underwater on such a chart in terms of the way you look at the world. You said good things about Colombia, so they would be above the watermark. Could you do that for all the nations in Latin America to give me a better sense of which ones are deeply troubled? And then in those countries, how much of the land is really is ungovernable? Where people's lives are at risk, they're leaving. You talked about the millions of people who fled different countries. Where can I get that information so I gain a more granular understanding?
We'd be happy to set up a classified briefing and go through all the factors, but I wouldn't characterize Guatemala as underwater other than what we saw as the impacts of the hurricanes last year. There are good people, and there are aspects of the Guatemala security team that I work with that are really good and working hard to make a difference. I cited one, their special naval force. Their new Minister of Defense is committed to doing the right thing. He's a trusted partner. Their new Chief of Defense, the same. And so there are many reasons to be concerned about the sense of urgency with which we have to get after the threats. But we also need to recognize and play to our strengths too, which is democracy and values. And I see real rays of light with respect to Guatemala in that case, ma'am.
We have a lot of people who are escaping from Guatemala and don't want to go back there. So the and you could blame it on the hurricane, but I think there are other reasons as well. In terms of the actual out-migration, does your office calculate that from these various countries, or is that some other State Department or something?
That's other agencies, State Department and the United Nations that work on that data, ma'am.
Do you have good maps of where opiates are being grown in the region under your command?
Absolutely. The DIA and the CIA have the best data available and the best analysts in the world.
All right. So if you help me gain a better understanding, we could access that data?
Ma'am, we can set up a classified briefing, and we'll do that as soon as your availability supports. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate your service. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Capter, we'll also work with the staff to get you the information that the CIA World Fact Sheet has, and the World Bank has great statistics from everything from economic development to stunting to land title and everything else to help you be prepared for when you have your classified briefing. I found those to be excellent resources. Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, you appear to be muted.
Okay. In my conversation yesterday that I mentioned on the telephone with President Duque of Colombia. One of the biggest topics that he brought up was the border problem they have with Venezuela. Skirmishes that are taking place along the border with Venezuela, fueled in large degree, they say, by the drug traffic from Colombia through Venezuela and to the rest of the world. President Maduro in Venezuela has driven 1.7 million Venezuelans to abscond to Colombia. So they're dealing with 1.7 million refugees on top of all the other problems that Colombia is facing. Is there any indication, Admiral, that the reported skirmishes with Venezuela will escalate, and do we have any presence in that matter?
It's a credit to the Colombians and their humanity and their heart that they've been able to accept this large influx of migrants in a way that has respected them and human rights in the midst of COVID. And it hasn't been easy. And I commend President Duque and his team and their leadership in this manner and their adherence to democracy in a really tough situation, tough times. Because right next door you have Maduro and his cronies, enabled by tens of thousands of Cubans, hundreds of Russians, Chinese, and Iranians, including Iranian security assistance, including cyber assistance by Russian Spetsnaz, that have created a virtual narco trafficking paradise. And so the significant influx of narco trafficking into Venezuela by the ELN, FARC Distance, and other groups, and then the ease with which they can use that now as a base of operation to distribute into Europe, into the Caribbean islands, to the United States, via Central America, has complicated all of our efforts to get after the problem set. And so you cite specifically the recent clashes, which on the face of it would look like Maduro has turned against the narco traffickers, but it's, as in all these things, much more complicated. And then they quickly pointed and tried to blame this on Colombia when the facts of the matter are it's more of a drug war, turf war between the Maduro security forces, which are for the most part led by corrupt leaders, and the narco traffickers, which share a similar value system. So Colombia has held the line on the border. Our role, the DoD's role, and our interagency role with this crisis, we've used it to strengthen our relationship with Colombia, particularly in sharing intel. It's a two-way. We get some of our best intel from their teams, and we share what we know. And we've developed great protocols and systems using our security cooperation authorities in this regard.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Bryan, and then we have Mr. Diaz-Balart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a question. I know we were talking about some of the issues around human trafficking and stemming the flow of migrants north on that very dangerous journey that we keep hearing about. What are we doing to help train some of our partners that are involved, along the way and along that journey? Are we doing anything to help them deal with it? And are you involved in those countries at all, helping with some of the security issues that are there? And there's a lot of work going on with trying to build the economy, but nothing's going to happen with the economy in those countries until we get the security piece straight. So if you can enlighten us on that, that would be great.
Absolutely right. We've got to have sustainable security to support the democracies and the prosperity. The three of it goes together like the three legs of a well-balanced stool. And INL and State Department and other DEA, CBP, and others have the principal role working with the police, which need to be at the front line. In many of these countries, though, the police are the most likely to be corrupted and the ones that need the most help. They're backstopped by their partner nation militaries. And what we've seen is the growing credibility of partner nation militaries. It turned from insurgencies of the 80s and 90s to professional forces that still have a long ways to go, but that have made progress. Our role in this is that professional development. It starts with education programs. The IMET program, which is congressionally appropriated through the Foreign Ops, is our main game changer there. We bring people to U.S. schools. We're funded at about 11 million range. When you all ask for what more we could do, there's more that could be invested there to come to U.S. schools. Another great program was mentioned is our human rights program, funded out of our own budget at 5 people for a whole hemisphere. More could be done there if resources were available. Women's peace and security. So you'd say, how does that matter? But it matters a lot, and it's a nascent program that we've started, and it's proven to help our partners see how they can better leverage the 50% of their population to get involved in sustainable security. So we have a small amount of funds, and what we've seen is it resonates with our partners as we go forward. Non-commissioned officer development. Here in the United States, we value our enlisted team. Our partners sometimes see that differently. Getting them to value officers and enlisted as one team working together inclusively is key, and we're really investing along with our state partners in that. So going forward, DoD has a role to play, and we look forward to playing that role as we work on a sustainable solution under the new $4 billion multi-year project that's being conceived.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Mr. Ryan, what you brought up on the fishing is something that we need to be addressing with the international community on that. So I look forward to working with you more on that. Mr. Diaz-Balart.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just realized, separate note, I was a little concerned. I've been eating some white corn chips, and I realized that the ones I've been eating have been now recalled. So I hope that I'm okay. But
if anything happens, I'll call 911
thank you very much. You see me like turning green on the screen. All right. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Admiral, you talked a lot, and there's been questions about the TCOs, about these organizations. Talk to me about, is there any relationship between the cartels that, that import arms, right? That traffic in arms, the cartels that traffic in humans, the cartels that traffic in drugs. What relationship do they have? Are they, is that all they do? Like if there's a cartel that traffics in humans, is that all they do? Or are they also the same ones or related to, have any associations with the ones that traffic in drugs and other things? And also, do they have any association or potential contacts with cartels that not only are in this hemisphere? So talk to us a little bit about, are they a threat? Who are they? Why are they a threat? I understand this is not a classified briefing, but whatever you think you can share.
When COVID struck with a vengeance and just tore at all of us, frankly, I'm sure everyone here on the screen has been impacted in some way, family member, personally. What we saw, the murderous nature of the cartels, is they expanded their business model to include PPE and COVID supplies and social services as they tried to gain influence with the population. So there's over 200 different narco trafficking groups. And one of the key efforts going forward has got to be to map them and rank and rack and stack the most important and the strongest to the less, and determine the sorts of things that each one thrives on. And it changes and changes over time. So illegal mining, business, extortion, human trafficking, narco trafficking, the distribution of medical supplies, corruption of and undermining of public business. So their business model revolves around whatever they can do to make money and keep themselves in power. That has got to be part of how we get after it going forward, and that's been a key part of our renewed efforts.
And you've had some questions about ISR. And I just want to make sure that we kind of understand not only the importance of it, but you talked about before, I think it was to Mr. Calvert's question about, what percentage of ISR you get. Are you getting enough? And I understand that nobody has enough, right? I mean, there's no command that will tell you, oh, we've got too much of it, right? But I'm saying, how deficient is the level that you're getting? Is it very deficient, or are you kind of scraping by, but you'd like a little bit more? Where are you there? And actually, Madam Chairwoman, I just realized that my time may have run out, so maybe if we have a second round, but if not, Admiral, if you can maybe just, get some information to me on that when you can.
About 8.
As Madam Chairwoman for going over.
Oh, well, that's okay. If you could answer that quickly. And Mr. Diaz-Balart, I am worried about your health because this is the second round. Maybe those corn chips have gotten to you. So if you can answer maybe in 30 seconds and then get the committee back a fuller response.
8% of our requirement was met last year, and that was before the cut of the transfer fund. And that transfer fund represented about 38% of our overall budget for ISR. So we'll be even less than that as we move through the execution year this year.
Thank you. Mr. Carter.
I'm back.
I see that. Welcome.
You can't hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see you. So but just keep going.
Madam Chair, before the judge asks his question, I'm going to apologize and I will chair my California delegation meeting, the few of us that are left. So I appreciate the judge taking over for a while. Thank you.
He is most welcome to do that. Mr. Carter for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Admiral, you mentioned an idea that you had of a Marshall Plan for Central and South America. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Very encouraged, sir, by the efforts of administration to apply resources to Central America and look at a longer-term plan of $4 billion over time, as I understand it, as it moves forward. But I think as we look globally at the challenges and then where the opportunities, there's so much opportunity here in this hemisphere with the people. We share so much values, democracies, the proximity, the resources, a tremendous resource-rich hemisphere. It has a positive water ratio. Water is so important in the global future, and so much arable land, access, important sea lines of communication, deep harbors. And so if we look at the promise of the hemisphere and the resources, and I think as a nation, is it time to look at a big idea for the hemisphere along the lines of some that we've seen in the past. And I certainly get very excited about the opportunity. The challenges and the sense of urgencies are real, but we can leverage these opportunities to make strength for the Americas a hemisphere of promise and prosperity.
I think that I like that challenge. With our resources and the spending we're doing, it's going to be interesting how we would fund such a thing. But one of the things the Marshall Plan did was rebuild the existing industries of the countries that have been destroyed in war. Our challenge would be more to strengthen in their existing various factories and so forth, but in turn build up into our industry going down and participating in that area. And that requires a safe harbor for them to be able to do it, including a legal system that gives them recourse and protection under the law, which is one of the real weaknesses I know about in Central America. You just can't get protection from the legal system. So it's going to be a real challenge and take a lot of people to go down there and straighten things out. But I like the idea we're thinking about it. So thank you, Admiral, for doing that. Madam Chairman, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Carter. Sir, I have a couple of, I have one follow-up on the climate change. Due to time limitation, we talked a little bit about it yesterday, but we did touch on resilience and what we needed to do to be prepared for future storms for our assets, especially in Key West, housing, backup, emergency generators, all those kinds of things, because you're interconnected with everyone on the island as well. So I know you have some of that available. Anything you want to add to that later, please provide to the committee. I have two questions. One is on Brazil. In 2019, President Trump designated Brazil as a major non-NATO ally after he visited the Brazilian president. Last month, Brazil's president fired the defense minister, and more recently, the three branches of Brazil's armed forces all jointly resigned after meeting with the new defense minister of Brazil. Can you provide us a little bit of an update on the situation in Brazil and how this has affected your relationship and what with the new defense minister, who was a celebrated military dictator, part of a dictatorship, 1964 through 1985, they killed and tortured thousands of Brazilians. So could you maybe enlighten us as to what we're doing about that now?
The designation of Brazil as a major ally, non-NATO partner, was exactly the right thing to do to recognize the progress that has been made in the professionalism of their force. We have a great history and a foundation to work forward from with their participation with us in World War II. I've been to Brazil on multiple occasions, gone to their schools, met with their armed forces, and that's what we do. We work with their institution, and the core of their institutions are professional and are doing the right thing, and have responded in a professional manner. I'm very confident in my conversations with their chief of defense and others that they're going to stay that professional course, and I think that's what militaries do as the ebb and flow of politics occurs, and I think we're seeing some of that now in Brazil. If I could just touch on that resilience question with JIADF too, so important.
I don't have enough time because I have one more question. So if you could get back to that, I want to be respectful of your time. I'm going to, in my capacity as a member of Congress, talk to state about what's going on with the defense minister. So I understand you have a different role that you play with that. Humanitarian assistance. Last year, Congress provided $90 million. That's 15 more than requested for humanitarian assistance. That was under the CARES Act for the COVID response. Before COVID, the USS Comfort and Mercy hospital ships were often deployed to do humanitarian assistance in the region. Has there been any discussion about bringing back a hospital ship to the region later this year?
The Comfort deployments were extremely successful with hearts and minds and helping our partner nations with their health services, which have been really stressed. We're actively planning on the right opportunity to do medical engagement. It may be via the Comfort or a scalable air mobile concept that we're working on called HEART. We're looking at the right time for that. Many of our forces for that are Guard, and our NGO partners play heavily in that. And as we know, the Guard and our military is very engaged right now supporting our domestic COVID response. So as we plan forward, we're looking along with the Department of Defense at when the best window is. We certainly think there is more opportunity there for that really important program, the humanitarian assistance being coupled with that medical support. And it shows the best of who we are here in the United States with an outstretched hand of help.
Well, I want to thank you for your emphasis and for what you discussed with me with humanitarian assistance and the role that the Department of Defense can play in development and diplomacy in that engagement. I also, when going through with your bio, because I'm going to thank you for your years of service, you understand humanitarian assistance in a way that really brought it home to me. Your work on the USS Shiloh when the tsunami hit Indonesia. So you know how important our military can be showing in professionalism, in the way that we can deliver aid and the way we can deliver service. And we do that in a way that our near peer competitors can't. And so anything you'd like to say in closing about humanitarian assistance would be appreciative if you want to give this chair a little more direction on how to use the Department of Defense for that. And once again, Thank you so very much for years of service. We wish you good health and a wonderful retirement.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for representing that experience I had on Shiloh. It really made an impression to the whole crew and all of us that that winning the competition is so important and so less costly really than the conflict that we never want to have. And so we've got to invest in winning this day-to-day competition globally, not just regionally, but globally. And so the modest investments in things like humanitarian assistance, hospital ships, engagement, training, education are really key to doing that. And we've got to have that capability to bring it, but we're best when we bring it with a handshake and when we can in the future, a hug. Thank you for recognizing that.
Well, thank you again. We all, as you can tell from the accolades early on, thank you for your service and wish you the best. I want to thank all the committee members for their time. So, Mr. Carter, we are going to adjourn at this time. You standing in for the ranking member. So this concludes today's hearing and the subcommittee stands adjourned. Thank you all.